Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining on today's webinar for NotPetya ransomware, yet another ransomware attack, which here we are going to be talking about in terms of how this ransomware occurred in Ukraine, how it spread through the rest of the countries, and what were the repercussions. By way of introduction, my name is Suhail Ismail, and I'm the sales manager here at ESET Australia. Also got Winnie Dodd, who is our senior technical engineer based out of Sydney office at ESET, and he will be highlighting upon how this malware really occurred on the last week of July and how it spread through the rest of the world, very similar to WannaCry. So before I hand over to Winnie, I just want to highlight how this ransomware surfaced. So on the last week of July, this large-scale ransomware attack struck around more than 60 countries, and this attack was dubbed as Petya, NotPetya, Golden Eye. It went by various names. It not only encrypted the data files on thousands of computers around the world, but also the MBR of their hard disks. So after being attacked, victims were fully blocked from accessing their system. The next day, they rebooted it, very similar to WannaCry again. So it's really impossible to talk about this attack without mentioning its predecessor, like I said, the WannaCry, and that really went on to affect thousands of computers in last week of May, and cripple companies and public institutions around the world. Just like how earthquake has its after effects, and how also I mentioned when we did the WannaCry webinar that this is just the trailer or the beginning, and many such attacks are to be expected. So it didn't come as a surprise that this attack surfaced yet again, or a similar attack surfaced yet again in the cyber world. So remarkably, no ESET clients were affected by this attack, and this is not because the attack did not target any of the ESET clients, but rather it was no match for the advanced technology or the layer technology that ESET has, and its strong defense mechanisms that we have in place if such attacks were to take place. So without further ado, now I would like to hand over to Winnie, who would talk about the attack in detail, how it surfaced, and what were the repercussions of it. So over to you, Winnie, now.
Thank you, Sahil. So now that we've heard the effects of this recent malware attack, so we'll try to delve deeper into what is NotPetya, its characteristics, also the attack vectors, and also finally we'll try to discuss how to better protect ourselves. So here is actually a sample of the ransom note that victims saw on their computers upon discovery that they were infected. So compared to the WannaCry ransom note, it doesn't really have those added timers that need to capitalize on the fear of the victims to lose the data if money isn't paid within the deadline. So it seems that you just need to pay any time, and you'll get your money. You'll get your data. Also, take note of the complexity of the personal installation key and the email address. So that's a bunch of characters there. This can make things more difficult for someone interested in recovering his files by paying the ransom. So this is pretty different from the other ransom notes that we saw in other ransom attacks, malware attacks before, or ransomware attacks before that tries to, or wants to actually get money from people. Now, this malware affected around 16,000 computers in 64 countries. And it did affect large companies with global reach, like the global company Maersk. Now, people initially thought that this was just a variant of the Petya malware, so that's why they call it NotPetya, other variants of that name. And then that Petya malware actually surfaced around March 2016. And because of the similarities, they thought, this is probably NotPetya or something similar to that. Now, the similarities include the malware targeting of the master boot record, which triggers a restart, and then after that, there would be an encryption of data, and then asking for the ransom at the end. But upon further analysis, Petya is much more sophisticated. It's actually using more complicated tools to spread. And the one thing that's very different is that it doesn't seem to provide a way for decryption to happen. So it was very effective in spreading within the network once it gets in, and then using Eternal Blue or Eternal Romance and a modified version of Mimkatz, it would be able to spread once it's actually in your network. And when it gains access to your system, it will try to infect the master boot record. If it successfully infects that, it will encrypt the whole drive itself as well as override the MTR. After that, it will then display the ransom note. Now, if this fails, it will encrypt all files on an operating system level, similar to the Michelle malware that we have observed before. So it's actually pretty similar, not just to Petya, but to other malwares that was detected in the world that was before this. And then, as I've mentioned, it uses Eternal Blue, Eternal Romance, and a tweaked version of Mimkatz to spread. Now, with all of those behavior, some people are going to ask, is this really a ransomware? Now, this attack and the way it was designed and executed leads to a lot of people asking this. Ransomware aims for profit. They enable this by having a well-designed system to collect money and decrypt files when people pay. Now, this does not seem to be what happened here. Pretty soon after the attack, the email address for payment was blocked. So that leaves no other way for victims to contact the attacker. Also, remember the ransom note that I've showed you guys earlier? It contained the personal installation key. Now, on other ransomwares, this key is generated by the ransomware during encryption. But the key that we find on the screen is actually fake, and it's just a random generated string of characters. So even if this was sent to the attacker, they wouldn't even use this as the actual key generated by the malware is in the readme.txt generated by the malware, which is completely different from the screen. Also, one thing to note here is that during encryption, for a ransomware, usually it would have a way to restore its modification. A lot of security researchers, though, found that this current version of the malware has behaviors close to a wiper. Now, a wiper has a goal to destroy and damage data. It's not really to make money. Now, NotPetya has the capability to purposely overwrite the MBR section of the disk by a new bootloader, and also some wiper functions are executed under some conditions, wiping out sectors of data. So, we also need to consider the timing and location. And even the result of the initial attack makes security experts question the intent of this. So, around 60% of all infected machines are located in Ukraine, and the rest are just mainly systems belonging to global organizations with dealings in Ukraine. The attack also began the day before Constitution Day in Ukraine, which is June 27th. Now, as seen in WannaCry and other ransomware observed before, they would usually attack before weekends. And why do they do this? It's to minimize being detected and maximize the infections. But June 28th isn't a holiday in many countries. It's mainly just Ukraine. Now, at this point, we don't know with 100% certainty who is behind these attacks, but the implication of the possibilities would scare us, as tools this advanced can be used by well-resourced groups and thus make it really effective. And this could affect a lot of more people than usual. So let's look at the blast radius. So how did this attack start and how did it spread? So it seems they used a supply chain attack to install a backdoor to target computers. So what is this? There is this Ukrainian accounting software, Medoc, which is little known outside of Ukraine, but is used by most companies within Ukraine. What happened was, there were a couple of software updates that contained a backdoor module. So one was on April 14th, the other was on May 15th, and then there was one on June 22nd. So let's say you're an accountant and you were using Medoc's application in your day-to-day programs, and you always see the update happen anyway. So you would not have any idea that the module that you just got is malicious, since it wouldn't really indicate anything. And you trust the software because you're using it every day. Now, it comes directly from Medoc, so of course you would trust it, and that's how stealthily this backdoor got installed. Now, that sounds dangerous. More so because this is very difficult to do. It seems very unlikely that attackers could do this without access to MeDoc's source code and their update server. So this allowed them to modify it and then push the backdoor as a part of the update module. Now, using that backdoor, they used they used that to push the malware and then wreak the havoc to the system. So once installed, it used different ways to spread. I've mentioned the different ways to spread, but we'll try to discuss how it does that. So first, let's try the modified Mimikatz. So what it does is that it attempts to extract the user's credentials and then use them with psexec and then WMIC to search for shared folders and disks. After that, it then spreads via the computer network. So in this way, it managed to infect computers located in different countries and regions. And that's why we actually saw that the companies affected by these, like even companies that have already updated their software to address the SMB vulnerability, some of them was also affected by this. It's because of they're using modified memcats to spread through the network aside from the eternal glue and the eternal romance. So also similar to WannaCry, it used the NSA developed eternal glue and the eternal romance. Now both are actually SMB exploits which were addressed by the Microsoft Security Update MS17010. So that was released last March 14, 2017. Now, most of the spread was through the Mimkatz, but then again, there were some lateral spread using these two exploits, which is surprising since considering all the noise that WannaCry made in the media, you would have expected people to patch their systems now, right? Well, a recent survey conducted with CIOs and IT leaders found out that only about half have implemented new security measures following the WannaCry ransomware attack, and only about 15% plan changes in response to Petya. Also, the poll showed that more than 1 in 4 organizations typically wait longer than a month to apply the latest software patches. So one thing we can see here is that organizations responding slowly to security vulnerabilities can lead to these two still becoming somewhat effective in spreading the malware. With that in mind, we also have to consider that these things weren't developed in isolation. This was the latest in a series of similar attacks, and all of these attacks were detected by ESET before. That's why ESET was able to protect its customers from the NotPetya outbreak. So these attacks were suspected to be conducted by a group that ESET researchers call telebots. In the final stage of its attacks, the telebots group would always use the kill disk malware to overwrite files with specific file extensions on the victim's disk. Now, this puts the cart before the horse. Collecting ransom money was never the top priority for the telebots group. They don't even have a ransom note in their attacks before this year. So in the period between January and March 2017, the telebots attackers compromised the software company in Ukraine, but this is not related to MEDOC. And then using VPN tunnels from there, they were able to gain access to the internal networks of several financial institutions. In the final stage of the attack, the telebots attackers pushed ransomware using stolen Windows credentials and sysinternal psexec. Now, this new ransomware was detected by ESET products as the filecoder.nkh. Once executed, this ransomware encrypts all files, and then the malware adds the .xcrypted file extension or the encrypted files. Now, in May 18, 2017, which is the second dot there, our researchers noticed the activity from another ransomware family. This time the Win32 file coder is me.c. Now, the malware was created right after the execution of the MEDOC software that is widely used by accounting personnel in Ukraine. Now, the malware had an embedded Mimikatz DLL that it used to extract Windows accounts credentials from the memory of a compromised PC. Now, with these credentials, the malware started to spread inside its host network using the sysinternal psexec utility. Now, ESET published the encryption tool for this, and actually this event didn't regain much media attention. And then the third one, as we have discussed, is the NotPetya ransomware last June 2017. which is actually more sophisticated compared to the initial attacks and affected more organizations. Now, by keeping a close eye on these activities, ESET was able to adapt our products to protect all of our customers. And one other thing to tell us about this is that there are groups out there that continue to evolve in order to conduct disruptive attacks against Ukraine, with lots of innocent people getting caught in the crossfire. Now, it's quite organized, and it evolves quite rapidly, and this would not disappear anytime soon. So we should always be ready, which makes us ask the question, so how should we be ready? Now, first up, I know some of you have already heard of a kill switch, which is similar to WannaCry, because what happens is that the malware looks for the perfc.dll under C Windows, and if it's found there, it would not run. So thus, if you create a file named perfc in that folder, even without any extension, it would stop the malware from executing. Now, given the way this behaves, this is more like a vaccine, actually. Now, the solution or vaccine would only apply to this specific malware. With that in mind, organizations should strive to be ready for the dangers in the future. And do that with the following. By the way, in the previous webinar for WannaCry, we have discussed best practices to protect yourself. All those points mentioned there still apply. And that webinar and previous webinars are available in the ESET Australia YouTube channel. Now, as always, make sure you always install an antivirus solution in your home and work computers, and ensure your system is always updated. If possible, you should also block the execution of exe files within app data and temp. Now, disable the default admin accounts and communicate with admin shares. And if possible, disable SMB version 1. Also, if you can, you also need to ensure your network is well configured and segmented, and constantly monitor traffic for any abnormal behavior. If possible, and this should be something that should be part of a long-term plan, you should always try to identify any crucial data you have and information in your computer, and then make sure you have a backup of it. And then, as mentioned before, keep the backup offline. This way, if your computer is attacked successfully by either a ransomware or a wiper, there will be a way for you to restore it to a recent state. Now, it's also essential to manage passwords carefully. As we have seen in this attack, it actually gets credentials from your computer and then uses it so that it can spread. Now, if the same password is used across different management centers, even if only one of the infected machines possesses the credentials of the administrator, this could then infect the whole network. To avoid this, it's best to ensure that passwords should not be replicated across different teams and management centers, and it's also important to use two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication would add an additional layer of protection to the credentials normally used by validating users. So in case of infection, this would prevent lateral movement across your network should the malware try to gain remote admin access to those other computers, which is just like one of the benefits of using two-factor authentication. Now, since we have talked about two-factor authentication, I'm not really sure if everyone is aware, but we do have an ESET product that you can easily install in your system to add another layer of protection for your accounts. Now, the ESET Secure Authentication helps you secure your data in a hassle-free way. By complementing your normal authentication with a second factor, it effectively reduces the risk of data breaches caused by weak or leaked passwords or unauthorized use of accounts. So, how does it work? Usually, you log into your computer or to your VPN or to an RDP server using a password related to your account. So that password is going to be static. It's something that you know, and it will be valid for sometimes as short as 3 months or sometimes valid indefinitely. Now, this can be a risk if someone gets a hold of your password. And also, a lot of people use weak passwords. And for some people, and I know a couple of them who actually use complicated passwords, there is a tendency for some of them to write the password somewhere. Now, this kind of risk is mitigated by a second factor for authentication. So that second factor is going to be a one-time password, and it's going to be automatically generated and it can only be used once. And then only after entering both these passwords would you be allowed access to internal company data. So where can we use the ESET Secure Authentication? Now, this product is configured to be able to access your company's VPN. It will be able to protect your remote desktop protocol, also additional authentication for desktop login. So when you sign into an operating system, it could protect you from there. And we also do have support for web and cloud services via Microsoft ADFS 3.0, such as Office 365, even Microsoft Web Apps. And then also Exchange Control Panel and the Exchange Administrator Center, VMware, and even Regis-based services. So with that in mind, there would always be new attacks and new vulnerabilities as technology progresses and becomes complex all the time. So having ESET Secure Authentication, it would be useful and effective as an added layer on top of the protection being afforded to you by ESET endpoint products. So if you have any questions, you can email us at au.support@eset.com. And thank you guys for listening.